In life, there are moments we never expect to happen, until they do. Today, we're about to dive into a story filled with secrets, betrayal, and deception, the story of a man, a broken family, and the battle to reclaim what was stolen. Jonathan, a man who once lived a peaceful life, is now facing dark, devious schemes he never could have imagined. The very people closest to him, those he trusted the most, are the ones behind the sinister plots to take what's his. Will Jonathan uncover the truth? Who is behind all of this? And can he regain what he's lost, or will he fall into the trap set by those who betrayed him? Don't miss what's coming next, because the truth will be revealed, right after this. The air was thick with tension in the small apartment, the weight of unspoken words hanging between Jonathan and his wife, Olivia. Jonathan, a mid-level corporate manager, had always lived a life that seemed perfectly in order. He had a stable job, a beautiful wife, and a home that they had built together. But in the span of a few days, everything had changed. Olivia had given him an ultimatum. "Jonathan, I need you to transfer the house to my sister, Sarah," Olivia had said the night before, her voice calm but firm. "She's going through financial difficulties, and we're in a position to help." Jonathan's heart sank. The house wasn't just property, it was a legacy. It had been passed down from his grandparents, the last tangible connection to a past he cherished. It was all he had left of his family's history. He couldn't just give it away without understanding why. Something didn't sit right. "I'm not sure I understand," Jonathan replied cautiously, his brow furrowed. "We've worked so hard for this place, Liv. Are you sure Sarah needs it that badly?" Olivia's eyes softened, but there was an edge to her voice. "She's family, Jonathan. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Over the next few days, Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. His mind replayed Olivia's request over and over, and each time it made less sense. He loved his wife, but he couldn't ignore the gnawing suspicion that there was more to this than Olivia was letting on. One evening, as Jonathan sat at his desk going through the bills, his phone buzzed with a new email. It was from his bank. The subject line read, "Unusual activity detected in your account." A quick glance at the email revealed several large, unexplained withdrawals from their joint account. Jonathan's heart raced as he clicked through to view the transaction history. They were all connected to a private account in Sarah's name. His suspicions only deepened. Unable to ignore the mounting evidence, Jonathan decided to take matters into his own hands. He began to look into Olivia's emails. At first, it was subtle, small signs of something hidden beneath the surface. A conversation about future plans with Sarah, talk of how easy it would be to get Jonathan's signature on the deed of the house, and then, as he dug deeper, it became undeniable. There, in black and white, was the shocking truth: Olivia and Sarah's husband, Andrew, had been in a secret relationship for months. They had been plotting to convince Jonathan to transfer the house to Sarah, not out of family loyalty, but as part of a larger scheme to claim the property for themselves. Jonathan couldn't believe it. His world came crashing down as he realized that the woman he loved, the woman who had always stood by him, had been hiding the truth about her affair, and their plans to steal everything he had worked for. Armed with undeniable proof, Jonathan decided it was time to confront Olivia and Andrew. The anger and betrayal he felt were overwhelming, but he knew he needed to stay calm. He invited Olivia and Andrew over to the apartment, telling them he needed to discuss something important. When they arrived, Jonathan wasted no time. "Olivia," he began, his voice icy, "I know everything." Olivia's face went pale, and Andrew shifted uncomfortably beside her. "What are you talking about, Jonathan?" Olivia asked, feigning confusion. "Don't play dumb," Jonathan snapped, slamming the pile of printed emails and transaction records onto the coffee table. "This is the truth, Olivia. And I'm done with the lies." For a moment, there was silence. Olivia's eyes darted nervously, while Andrew avoided Jonathan's gaze. Finally, Olivia spoke, her voice shaking. Jonathan, please, we never wanted you to find out like this. Andrew, his expression resigned, sighed deeply. It was supposed to be simple, he muttered. You wouldn't have known anything, Jonathan. We would have gotten the house, and Sarah would have been set up. It was just business. Business? Jonathan echoed bitterly. You were stealing from me. From my family. It was then that Olivia broke down, the facade of composure cracking. I didn't want to do it, Jonathan, she said through her tears. But Sarah needed the money, and I didn't know how to stop. Andrew stepped forward, as though trying to comfort her, but Jonathan cut him off. You both disgust me, he said coldly. You betrayed me, and now, you will pay the price. Jonathan wasn't about to let this go. With the help of his lawyer, he filed a lawsuit against Olivia and Andrew for fraud and conspiracy. The evidence he had gathered, emails, financial records, and testimony from their own conversations, was enough to build a strong case. As the legal battle unfolded, Jonathan and Olivia's relationship disintegrated. Olivia tried to spin the story to her advantage, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. Andrew, who had been a respected attorney, lost his license to practice law after the case went public. Meanwhile, Sarah faced the backlash of her own, as the truth about her role in the scheme came to light. She had been complicit in the plan, fully aware of the affair and the plot to steal Jonathan's legacy. Months passed, and the legal battle took its toll on everyone involved. Jonathan had lost a lot, his trust in his wife, his family's legacy, and the life he thought he had. But through it all, he found solace in the support of his friends and colleagues. Jonathan and Sarah, despite everything that had happened, began to rebuild their relationship. They found a way to protect their inheritance, and in time, Jonathan realized that his legacy wasn't about the house, it was about the people he could trust. As for Olivia and Andrew, their lives had fallen apart. Olivia faced social exile, while Andrew's legal career was over. They had destroyed their own lives in pursuit of greed, and now, they had nothing left. Jonathan stood outside the old family home, looking at the place that had once been filled with memories. His relationship with Sarah had healed, and together, they had found a way to protect the property from future threats. But as Jonathan turned to leave, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number. You may have won this battle, Jonathan. But the game is far from over. Jonathan's phone buzzed again, the message lingering in his mind. You may have won this battle, Jonathan. But the game is far from over. The words echoed in his head as he stared at the screen. Who could this be? The number was unfamiliar, and there was no name attached to the message. Jonathan's heart raced, and an uneasy feeling crept into his chest. He thought he had put everything behind him, the betrayal, the lies, the legal battles. But this message made it clear that there were still ghosts from his past waiting to emerge. He leaned back in his chair, trying to calm himself. It had been a few months since the trial ended, and life had slowly started to regain some sense of normalcy. He and Sarah had rebuilt their relationship, and although it was far from perfect, they were learning to trust each other again. But now, this message threatened to undo all the progress they had made. Jonathan's mind raced. Was Olivia behind this? Could it be Andrew, somehow managing to cause trouble from behind bars? Or was it someone else, an even darker force that he hadn't considered? Determined to find out, Jonathan decided to investigate further. He reached for his laptop and began tracing the phone number, using a few contacts in the tech world to help him. The process was slow, but eventually, he found something, an old, encrypted email account that had been linked to the mysterious number. His fingers trembled as he typed in the password, which he had managed to obtain after a few attempts. The screen flashed briefly before revealing a set of cryptic messages. They were written in a way that felt like a puzzle, each one more cryptic than the last. But as he read through them, he recognized something chilling, references to Sarah, to the house, and to a plan that was still in motion. Jonathan's blood ran cold. The game wasn't over. The plan to take the house had been set in motion long before he even knew what was happening. And it seemed there was more at stake than just the property now. Jonathan's suspicion grew as he began piecing together the clues from the mysterious emails. It wasn't just about money or property anymore, there was something much deeper and darker lurking beneath the surface. He started to realize that the message he received wasn't just a threat, it was a warning. Someone was still watching him. The next day, Jonathan met with Sarah to tell her about the disturbing message. They sat in his living room, the air thick with tension as Jonathan explained the situation. "I thought we were done with all this," Sarah said, her voice tight. "I thought we had put it behind us, that Olivia and Andrew were the last of our problems." "I did too," Jonathan replied, frustration clear in his voice. "But something's not right. There's more going on here. Whoever's behind this isn't finished. They're still out there, waiting for their moment to strike." Sarah sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the gravity of what Jonathan was saying. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady but with a hint of fear. "We need to find out who's behind this. We can't just sit here and wait for them to make their move." Jonathan nodded. He knew she was right. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. He needed to act, and fast. But who could he trust? The enemies he had already uncovered, Olivia and Andrew, had done everything in their power to betray him. Now, there was someone else pulling the strings, someone with far more power and influence than he had anticipated. As the days went by, Jonathan began to dig deeper into the history of the house that had once been his family's pride and joy. He contacted old family friends and reached out to distant relatives who might know something about its history. What he found shocked him. The house was more than just a legacy, it was tied to a dark secret from Jonathan's ancestors, something that had been buried for generations. The property had once been the site of a bitter legal battle over a hidden inheritance, one that had been lost to time. But as Jonathan dug further, he uncovered evidence that suggested the inheritance wasn't completely gone. In fact, it was still very much alive, and someone was trying to claim it. The puzzle pieces began to fit together. Whoever had sent that message knew about the inheritance, and they were trying to manipulate Jonathan into giving up the house to claim it for themselves. Jonathan felt his heart racing. This wasn't just about a stolen property, it was about a legacy that had been hidden for years, and now, someone was determined to take it all. Jonathan and Sarah decided to confront Olivia and Andrew once and for all. They knew that they had to end this once and for all, but they also knew that this wouldn't be an easy confrontation. The meeting took place in a dimly lit cafe, a neutral ground where both parties could speak without risk of escalation. Jonathan and Sarah arrived first, their eyes scanning the room for any sign of their enemies. When Olivia and Andrew walked in, Jonathan could feel the tension rise. Olivia's eyes were cold, and Andrew's expression was guarded, as though he were preparing for a fight. "What do you want, Jonathan?" Olivia asked, her tone clipped. "We've already been through this. What else do you need from us?" Jonathan's gaze was steady, but the anger inside him was palpable. "I know what's going on," he said. "And I know that you're not done. I've uncovered everything, the emails, the transactions, the hidden inheritance. It's all out in the open now." Olivia's face tightened, but she didn't speak. Andrew, on the other hand, chuckled darkly. "You think you've won?" he said, leaning forward. "You've only scratched the surface, Jonathan. You have no idea what you're really up against." Jonathan's blood ran cold. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. After the confrontation, Jonathan and Sarah were left with more questions than answers. The pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together, but they were far from solving the mystery. Olivia and Andrew had made it clear that they weren't backing down, and now, Jonathan knew that there were more people involved, people with far more power and influence than he could have ever imagined. The future was uncertain, and Jonathan knew that the road ahead would be filled with danger and deception. But one thing was clear, he couldn't back down now. His family's legacy was at stake, and he would do whatever it took to protect it. As Jonathan and Sarah walked away from the cafe, he couldn't help but feel that the true battle had only just begun. The days after the confrontation were filled with unease. Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that something far more dangerous was lurking in the shadows. Olivia and Andrew's dismissive attitude only reinforced his suspicions. They weren't just trying to take the house anymore. There was something bigger at play, and Jonathan was determined to find out what. Sarah could sense his frustration, and she shared in his concerns. But they knew they couldn't fight this battle alone anymore. It was time to call in reinforcements. Jonathan reached out to an old friend, Mark, a former private investigator who had helped him on a few minor cases over the years. Mark was tough, sharp, and had a network of contacts that could dig into any corner of the city. If anyone could help uncover the truth, it was Mark. When they met, Jonathan wasted no time. "I need you to look into Olivia and Andrew, find out who else is involved in this. And I want to know everything about this hidden inheritance. Whoever's behind this, I want them in the open." Mark nodded, his expression serious. "You're in deeper than you think, Jonathan. But I'll do what I can. This isn't just a family dispute, it's something far more complicated. You might not like where this leads." Jonathan didn't care. He had already lost so much, his trust, his marriage, his family legacy. He wasn't going to back down now. A week passed before Mark returned with new information. He sat across from Jonathan and Sarah in their living room, his face grim. "I dug around," Mark began, pulling out a file with several documents. Olivia and Andrew were in way over their heads. This inheritance isn't just about the house. It's linked to an old family trust, one that has been hidden for generations. Jonathan's mind raced. An old trust? What do you mean? Mark flipped through the pages, showing Jonathan and Sarah some of the documents he had uncovered. The trust had been created by Jonathan's great-grandfather, a wealthy entrepreneur who had built the family fortune. It was meant to protect the family's wealth for future generations, but over time, it had been obscured by a series of legal loopholes and hidden clauses. But here's the kicker, Mark continued. This trust is still active. And it holds more than just property. It holds a significant amount of wealth, millions of dollars in stocks, bonds, and assets that no one knew about. It was hidden away, perhaps to protect it from being seized during times of financial instability. Jonathan's breath caught in his chest. So, that's why they were after the house. They didn't just want the property, they were after everything. Exactly, Mark confirmed. Olivia and Andrew must have known about this trust. They knew it would unlock a fortune if they gained control of it. But there's more. The trust has a very specific clause, it can only be inherited by a direct descendant. So, unless they could find a way to either marry into the family or forge a connection, they would never be able to access it. Jonathan leaned forward, his pulse quickening. So, that's why Olivia was pushing for the house. She was trying to claim it as part of the inheritance. Mark nodded. And I believe they've been working with someone who has been helping them navigate the legal side. Someone with knowledge of the trust's contents. I've started tracing their steps, but we're not the only ones looking for answers. Jonathan felt a chill run down his spine. Who else is involved? Mark looked at him, his expression grim. I don't know yet. But I have a bad feeling that this isn't just about Olivia and Andrew anymore. There are people out there, dangerous people, who want that wealth. And they'll do anything to get it. That evening, Jonathan couldn't sleep. The truth was becoming clearer, but the more he learned, the more complicated and dangerous the situation became. He had underestimated the depth of the conspiracy. It wasn't just about family betrayal, it was about something much bigger. There were forces at play that he couldn't fully comprehend yet. The next day, he received an unexpected visit. It was Emily, Olivia's sister, who had been caught in the crossfire of everything. Emily had been silent for months, staying away from the drama, but now, she had something important to share. "I know what you're going through, Jonathan," Emily said softly, her eyes filled with regret. "Olivia, she didn't just betray you. She's in deeper than you think." I didn't want to believe it, but now I know the truth. Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. "What truth?" Emily took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "Olivia and Andrew didn't act alone. There's someone else behind them. Someone I think you've already met." Jonathan furrowed his brow. "Who?" "Sarah," Emily whispered. Jonathan recoiled in shock. "What are you talking about?" "Sarah's been helping me through all this. She's the only one I can trust." Emily's face softened with guilt. "Jonathan, I wish I were wrong. But I've seen the way she's been acting. She's not the person you think she is. I've seen her with Andrew, there's a connection there. And I think she's been working with him, manipulating you from the inside." Jonathan's world seemed to tilt on its axis. The person he had trusted the most was now potentially part of the conspiracy he had been trying to stop. The betrayal was too much to process. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Jonathan asked, his voice raw. "I couldn't," Emily said. "I didn't want to believe it either. But now, it's clear that Sarah is involved in something bigger than either of us could have imagined." Jonathan and Emily agreed to confront Sarah together. They arranged to meet her in a secluded spot, away from prying eyes. Jonathan's heart pounded as he waited. This was the moment he had been dreading, the moment when he would have to face the truth about the one person he had believed was on his side. When Sarah arrived, she seemed calm, almost too calm. Jonathan could see the tension in her eyes, though she tried to hide it. "Jonathan," she said, her voice soft but guarded. "What's going on? Why the secrecy?" Jonathan took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "I need to know the truth, Sarah. Are you involved with Andrew? Are you working with him?" Sarah froze, her face paling slightly. "What are you talking about? That's crazy." "No," Jonathan said, his voice firm. "I know everything. Emily's told me what she's seen. The emails, the meetings, the lies. You've been playing both sides." For a moment, there was silence. Then, Sarah's eyes hardened. "You don't understand, Jonathan. I had no choice." Emily stepped forward. "You always had a choice, Sarah. And you chose wrong." Sarah's gaze flickered between Jonathan and Emily. Then, with a sigh, she spoke. "I never wanted it to get this far. But Andrew promised me everything, money, security. He said we could have it all, just like I've always dreamed." Jonathan's heart shattered as the woman he had trusted most in the world admitted her betrayal. But there was no time to dwell on it. The clock was ticking, and the enemies who had been pulling the strings were closing in. Jonathan's mind was racing. The pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together, but the truth was more complicated and painful than he had ever imagined. Sarah's betrayal had shattered his trust, but now, he had a bigger problem. The enemies he had been fighting, Olivia, Andrew, and the shadowy figures lurking in the background, were still out there. And the secret inheritance was only the tip of the iceberg. He couldn't let this go any further. He needed to take control of the situation before everything he had worked for was lost forever. With Sarah's confession hanging in the air, Jonathan felt a cold, steely resolve settle within him. He had no choice but to confront the people pulling the strings, and the only way to do that was to play their game. "Sarah, I don't know who you've become, but I'm done with the lies," Jonathan said, his voice low and filled with determination. "If you think you can take everything from me and walk away scot-free, you're wrong. You've made your choice, and now I'll make mine." Sarah's eyes flashed with a mixture of guilt and fear, but there was something else, something calculating. "Jonathan, You have no idea what you're dealing with, she said quietly. You think I'm the only one involved? There's so much more to this, so much more you don't understand. If you try to take me down, you'll be going after the wrong people. Jonathan didn't hesitate. Then tell me who they are. For a long moment, Sarah just stared at him, as if weighing her options. Finally, she spoke, her voice almost a whisper. You'll never find them in time. They'll destroy you before you even know what hit you. Jonathan didn't have time to process Sarah's words. He knew he had to act fast, and that meant setting a trap. Mark, the private investigator, had provided him with one final clue. There was a meeting scheduled at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. This was where the final transaction would take place. The players who had been orchestrating everything were finally coming together. Jonathan contacted the police, but he knew they couldn't be trusted entirely, not with so much at stake. He called in a few favors from some old allies, people who owed him, people he knew he could trust. He wasn't going into this alone. The night of the meeting, Jonathan and his team were ready. They stationed themselves around the perimeter of the warehouse, waiting for the figures to arrive. As the hours ticked by, the anticipation grew. Jonathan's stomach was in knots, but he couldn't afford to show any weakness. Finally, headlights pierced the darkness, and several cars pulled into the lot. Jonathan's heart raced. This was it. This was where it would all come to a head. He took a deep breath, checked his gun, and signaled his team to move into position. Inside the warehouse, the atmosphere was tense. Shadows flickered along the walls as figures emerged from the darkness. Jonathan recognized one of them immediately, Olivia. Standing beside her was Andrew, and behind them, a man Jonathan had never seen before, tall, dressed in a sharp black suit, with an aura of menace surrounding him. This is it, Jonathan, Olivia said coldly. You should have stayed out of this. Jonathan stepped forward, his gun steady in his hand. You've been playing a dangerous game, Olivia. And it's over now. Andrew laughed. You think you can stop us? You've already lost, Jonathan. It's too late. Just as he was about to speak again, the doors to the warehouse slammed open. Jonathan's team flooded in, and the situation quickly escalated into chaos. The man in the suit, who Jonathan now realized was the mastermind behind everything, pulled a gun from his jacket and aimed it at Jonathan. This is bigger than you think, the man said, his voice calm and dangerous. The trust, the house, the inheritance, it's all part of a much larger plan. And you were never supposed to be part of it. Jonathan barely had time to react. A shot rang out, but it wasn't from the mastermind's gun. Sarah, who had been lurking in the shadows, emerged with a look of desperation in her eyes. She fired, but the bullet missed its target, striking a nearby stack of crates instead. In that moment, everything seemed to freeze. Jonathan turned his attention to Sarah, his heart pounding. He had never imagined that she would turn on him in this way. She had always been the one person he could rely on, and now she had betrayed him in the worst way possible. Sarah, why? Jonathan shouted, the pain evident in his voice. She looked at him, her eyes filled with regret, but her resolve was unmistakable. I thought I could trust him, she whispered. But now I see how wrong I was. The mastermind, realizing that his plan was beginning to unravel, made a move to escape. But it was too late. Jonathan and his team were already on top of him, taking him down with swift precision. Within minutes, the warehouse was swarming with police, and the remaining conspirators were arrested. Olivia and Andrew were handcuffed and led away, their faces a mixture of shock and anger. In the days that followed, everything changed. The truth about the hidden inheritance and the conspiracy that had almost destroyed Jonathan's life was finally exposed. The people behind the plot were brought to justice, and the family legacy was restored to its rightful place. But even as Jonathan looked at the aftermath of the battle, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. Sarah was gone. She had disappeared into the night, leaving behind only a note that read, "I'm sorry for everything. I never meant for it to go this far." Jonathan had hoped for reconciliation, but he knew deep down that some wounds were too deep to heal. He couldn't change what had happened. All he could do was move forward. As for the house, the inheritance, and the family trust, they were safe, for now. But Jonathan knew that there were still people out there who might come after it again. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. And as he stood in front of the house, staring out at the horizon, Jonathan couldn't help but wonder, was it really over, or was this just the beginning of a new chapter? Months later, Jonathan stood at the doorstep of the house, looking out over the sprawling land that had once been the symbol of his family's prosperity. It had been a long journey, filled with betrayal, lies, and near destruction, but it was finally over. Or so he thought. The phone in his pocket buzzed, and Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. The message was simple: "You may have won this round, Jonathan, but the game isn't over." Not by a long shot. Jonathan stared at the screen, his fingers trembling as he typed a reply, "Who are you?" The response was instant: "You'll find out soon enough." As Jonathan put his phone away and looked out at the horizon, he couldn't shake the feeling that the story of the house, the inheritance, and the people who wanted it wasn't finished yet. There were still shadows in the distance, and Jonathan knew he had to be ready for whatever came next. And so, the truth has been uncovered, but the story doesn't end here. With so many unanswered questions and dark forces still lurking in the shadows, what happens next is anyone's guess. Do you think Jonathan will be able to rebuild his life? Or will the betrayal and lies catch up with him once again? We want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and share your theories with us. What do you think will happen next? Comment below. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more thrilling twists, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Stay tuned, because the mystery is far from over. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.